All right, let's do this. I'm sure a couple more might trickle in after, but we'll get rolling here so we can keep it within the hour here. All right, guys. Congrats to all of you that raced over the last couple weeks here in at Chile last weekend. We thought it would be a good time to bring precision fuel and hydration in, as we know we're getting into a big part of the year with a bunch of our A races coming up for running, and then getting into triathlon season, and with the volume and intensity ramping up, going to be an imperative time to get all your fueling on board and get dialed into what you need for the demands of what your training and racing is going to be coming up. So we got Sean from PH here today, who's going to talk to us about a bunch of stuff about their products and kind of what you need along the way here. We swapped to them this year because I'm a huge fan of their products. It's been a game changer for me in terms of using the gels, drink mix, and the hydration tabs. I just love like the flavoring of it, and that my gut can handle a lot of this. So if you haven't tried the products yet, they got some great stuff that you should try out. And don't forget the discount code we have for the club is in the guides section on the website. So you can find that in there for when you are placing your orders on their website as well. So I'll hand it over to Sean, and he's got a nice little presentation for us today. So welcome, Sean. Thanks for coming by, man. We appreciate you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for inviting me. And hello to everybody. I'm over here in Vancouver. And I think your temperature is probably roughly the same. But I run Canada for the company and the West Coast of the US. Been with the company since 2014, and precision, well, we were called Precision Hydration when we started, and we changed to Fuel and Hydration during COVID. I'll talk about that in a moment. But founded by Andy Blow, an ex-professional triathlete, and a sports science grad of one of the two best universities in the UK. Well, we consider them both three: Bath, Exeter, and Loughborough. And Andy was always sort of found himself with problems when he was trying to race long distance triathlon, especially in heat, and never completed. He was fine at 70.3s. And could never figure out what was going on. And he went eventually to see a cardiac doctor, who's still an advisor to the company. And he eventually sort of rolled it down, and after a lot of hunting around, gave Andy a sweat test. And it turned out that Andy had an incredibly high sodium loss rate, way off the charts, and also a very, very high sweat rate. And this will become apparent later on in the presentation. And started making his own concoctions to accommodate it. And when he finished a professional career, he was actually a sports scientist and coach to a couple of Formula One teams at the start of his kind of start of his career post triathlon. And then came to realize that other people suffered from the same issues. And Precision Hydration was founded on that basis, and we've grown since, from Andy and Johnny at the start in 2012, I think. I joined in 2014, and now we're 26 people, headquarters in Christchurch on the south coast of the UK. There's me in Vancouver. We've got an office in Portland in Oregon, one in Virginia. Virginia's a warehouse. We've got a warehouse in Germany, and one on the east coast of Australia. And we serve mainly, we started off in the professional market, which we're still very strong in. Teams in the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, soccer, hockey, Premier League, football, rugby, Formula One, triathlon, of course. And also special operations, military, and occupational health, mining and industrial stuff in very hot climates. So that's us as a background. And what we're going to talk about today is both the fuel side and the hydration side of the business. So I was kind of segue into how the fuel thing started. But oops. There we go. First thing we're going to talk about, we'll get down to basics. What are electrolytes? And these are the main electrolytes we always talk about: sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium. And by far, the most important one for us as endurance athletes is sodium. We lose sodium in our sweat predominantly. We lose trace amounts of the other minerals, the other electrolytes in our sweat, but they don't affect our performance. But losing sodium in significant quantities, which some people do, some people don't, will have an impact on what happens to your performance. And we spoke about that a bit earlier with Andy, and we'll talk about it in much more detail. But the key electrolyte, when we talk about electrolytes as precision fuel and hydration, we're only interested in sodium. And we also I want to even break that down from salt, because remember, salt is sodium chloride and 60% chloride, 40% sodium. We're not interested in the chloride component, just the sodium component. Now, there's a myth that, you know, sodium is something, or salt is something you take to alleviate the symptoms of cramp. And this slide, you might not be able to see it that well, it's quite small, but around cramp are a huge number of issues that influence cramp. And nobody knows what causes cramp, primarily because we're not allowed to do a lot of the testing in research studies. But secondly, it's very, very personal as well. And in case you can't read a lot of these, there are everything from, and we see these in endurance athletes, low carbohydrates, new exercise you're trying, you're not acclimatized to environment, electrolyte loss, boom, hyperhydration, too much fluid, sleep loss, pain or prior injury, genetics, of course, general fatigue, other medications you're taking, so side effects of that, underlying illness can definitely cause it. Overexcitation of working muscles, you know, definitely when you're sort of working out too hard at something you haven't done before. And the one we see most often actually in especially new novice athletes is stress or unrealistic expectations. You're asking your body to do something that you haven't prepared it to do. And another one is supplements, for example, caffeine. So many, many things that cause cramp, but sodium can help with cramp. The way we like to look at it is that there are these myriad number of causes, and it's a matter of checking them off. If you do suffer from cramp, then what we do recommend is, you know, in your journey to try and resolve the issue, sodium is a simple thing to check off your list. So in a training block, you know, of a 3-week block, if you can replicate the things that cause the cramp, then include a very strong sodium solution during that block and see if it alleviates the issue. And if it does, it's a nice simple solution. If it doesn't, then you know it's something else. So it's a very simple process. And that is separate from sodium and hydration we're talking about in general. But people always talk about cramp, and we like to sort of get that one out of the way, that salt and sodium don't resolve cramp, but in all cases, but in some cases they do. Whoops, going back. Oh, good, that worked. So we're very, very keen advocates of a process to start every single race and many training events fully hydrated in terms of sodium content. So when you are preparing for a race, it's really important, both with carbohydrates, of course, and with sodium and hydration, to be properly prepared for the activity you're about to undertake. And any race, doesn't matter what your sodium loss rates are, we encourage a very strong sodium solution the night before the event and the morning up to about 45 minutes before you start the event. And this is a very similar strategy to carbohydrate glycogen preloading in the build-up to a race. And it counters the effect, and many of you will have experienced this, and it's a common effect, and it's very common actually, even with professional athletes. And you'll know when you go to something like an Ironman or a marathon event, and you go to registration, and everybody's walking around with massive jugs of water, and they're just glugging water like it's going out of fashion. And of course, what happens is, you pee out most of your electrolytes. You kind of leach your system in the 48 hours before the event. And so this strategy is one to counter that, because often you've been traveling to an event, you're stressed, you haven't been sleeping as well. So preloading with a strong sodium solution the night before and the morning of, we've shown in studies is a fantastic prompt to start your event in the best possible shape. And it's something you should build into your plan. You don't have to use our product. And I should say that throughout this whole presentation, although it's me and our company giving this presentation, and you might like our products, but they're not the only products on the market. There are lots of other good products. But whatever product you decide to use, make sure you do a sodium preload, pretty much like you do your carbohydrate preload. So what will this do when you start preloading? It will encourage water retention, which is something we don't normally want in normal life, but especially in a triathlon, it's a really handy trick to have and a tool to have in the bag. By taking in, when you attach sodium ions to water molecules, that fluid will get absorbed directly into body cells and be retained there. And that's a really good thing in the start of a swim, for example. You're in your wetsuit, you might be in the water for an hour and a bit in an Ironman. And you want that fluid to be released during that swim. You're not intentionally taking any water on board during the swim, unless you got kicked in the face and you've got a big gulp. But so that water retention that will be caused by a high sodium intake prior to the event is a really handy thing. The next thing it'll do is it'll increase your blood plasma volume. And that's the primary reason we want sodium. We want to maintain our blood plasma volume at an optimal level. It sits between a very tight range, 135 to 145 millimole of sodium. And we never want that to drop significantly below that level, because then secondary effects come into affect our performance. So it's really important that prior to an event, our blood plasma volume is in optimal condition, because of course our blood is primarily important in transferring oxygen and nutrition to our working muscles. And one of the other main reasons is we don't want to reduce cardiovascular load. If our blood plasma volume drops, our blood gets thicker, our heart is working harder at the same effort to pump this blood around. And so we want our blood to be in good shape, so our heart is not overworking for the same effort. So it's a really important preparation process, and something you should all build in. And by the same token, how do we start onto the fuel? How do we start optimally fueled? Now, I should talk about fuel, because we started off, and for 6 or 7 years we were a hydration company, and many of our athletes, professional athletes, had asked us to make some fueling products. But being a startup and with limited resources, we just didn't have time. COVID hit. We suddenly had all professional sports kind of ended. So that at the time, that was 50% of our business. So we had a fair bit of time to start doing some research and some work. And we started developing our fueling products. And in 2020, we started that fairly recently, and we launched them 18 months ago. And so we have a whole range of fueling products, gels, chews, carb drink mix. The main thing. So same as hydration, you want to start optimally fueled as well. And there's lots of discussions. You see lots of things on the internet about carb loading prior to an event. And I should say, by the way, everything I'm saying is a generalization. We're all about individualization and specifics to you as an athlete. So some of the things I'm talking about might not work for you, but you should use this as your starting point and make adaptations for your particular needs. But a carb load roughly 2 to 3 days prior, you want to increase the proportion of carbs to 11 to 12 grams per kilo per day, leading into your event, and then significantly reduce fiber and fat. You don't need those in a race. Remember, racing an Ironman or a 70.3 is not a health event. It's not a healthy thing. It's not, as human beings, we're not designed to go out for 14 hours and thrash our bodies. Everything around training for a 70.3 and an Ironman is a very healthy lifestyle. Regular training, good nutrition, body movement, all the things associated with it. That's part of a healthy lifestyle, and it's the reason you do what you do. But the actual event itself is an incredibly demanding event on the body, and it's not the time to be thinking about all your macros and getting the right amount of fat and protein in and fiber. You want that in your general diet, but leading into a race, you want to get those carbs in and superload those carbs. And you've got enough fat in your body. You don't need any additional fat. Doesn't matter how light you are, you've got enough fat to fuel you for the next 2 or 3 weeks. When you get closer to the race, night before, morning of, you reduce that down to 1 to 4 milligrams and have a feed just before, and then a final top up. And this is a very important one, 30 grams roughly. If you're a caffeine user, with caffeine, but not necessary if you're not. 30 grams of carbs, no more than 15 minutes prior to start time. So if you're a triathlete, that's when you'd stick a gel up the sleeve of your suit. You're in the chute, you've got your hat on, your goggles on. That's when you're taking it, 15, 10 minutes before the race. Now, there's a specific reason for that. You'll see a lot of people taking a gel 30, 40 minutes before. They put on their wetsuit, and before they put the goggle and hats on, they'll have a gel, and it's about 30 minutes before. And what's going to happen is when you take a sugar hit like that, you're going to obviously get a blood sugar spike. And then if, as long as you're a healthy individual, you're going to get an insulin response, which is a natural thing to happen. And you want that to happen in normal life. But if you take that gel 30 minutes before, you get the sugar spike, you get the insulin response. And when you hit that water, what's happened is the insulin response is kicked in, and now your blood sugar levels are dropping. You do not want that to happen. You want blood sugar levels to be rising. So that's why you want to take it a short time before, 10 to 15. So you get the sugar spike, but the insulin response doesn't have time to kick in. And then you hit the water, you get kicked in the face, you're off, 100 meters full pelt to get into position. And then glycogen is released from muscle stores into blood, and you're off to the races. Your system's fully operational now. So that's why the timing of that final top up is really important, and keep that in mind. And even for something like a marathon or a half marathon, it's a really good practice to use. And so what we're doing when we do this, we're maximizing our glycogen stores. Glycogen is stored carbohydrates, and we store it in 2 parts, or in 2 places in our body, in our muscles and our liver. And if you're a 75 kilo athlete, you probably store about 500 grams of carbs or glycogen, as glycogen, and probably about 150 in your liver, say 350 roughly in your muscles. The stores in your liver are predominantly for sort of normal body function, brain function, keeping the system and the lights on kind of thing. And the stores in the muscle is going to be released immediately into your efforts that you're putting out. So those final boosts basically spare those stores. When you load up and you do that preload, you're sparing those glycogen stores as much as you can. And of course, the rate at which you use those stores is going to depend on your output. So if you're in zone 2, which you tend to be more in an Ironman, a long distance race, or a trail running event, you can be burning much more fat. Depends on, of course, it depends where your lactate turn point is on your curve, but we don't want to get too technical. But as you go further up the lactate curve, and into zone 3 and zone 4, if you're doing like a sprint triathlon or a 10K run, a park run, something at a higher zone rate, then you're burning much more of your glycogen stores, and your fat use is coming down. So bear that in mind, bear the event in mind, how you prepare to fuel for it. It's very, very important to do that. So does it matter? And we get this a lot, this question, does it matter what kind of carbs you take in? And there are many, many different types of carbs you'll see, and I've named some of them here.
I think it's L-I.
Oh, someone had a question? No. Oh, so lots of different carbs, and really the difference with them is, some of them will have different absorption speeds. Obviously, something like a turkey dinner at Thanksgiving is going to have a different absorption speed than a gel or a can of Coke. Different glycemic indexes, different risk of gastrointestinal distress for different people. Some people, for example, can't take maltodextrin. Some people, some of these products have artificial sweeteners in. So a lot of people can't take those. So that's an important thing to be aware of, and different sweetness. But fundamentally, most of these products are the same in the sense that they are produced or providing sugar to your body. And when you're exercising, especially when your demand for glycogen and for carbohydrate is high, your body really doesn't care what it is that's coming in, because it's going to convert it immediately and use it as soon as possible. Where it does have an impact is whether any of these differences for you will become apparent when you're using them. And I'm sure you're all experienced athletes, and you know what products and what types of carbs are working for you and what aren't. So it's an important thing to be aware of. But by the same token, it's important to have a wide variety. Even if you are using our carbs, I wouldn't just use only our carbs. Have a wider variety. You want a wide variety of tastes, of textures, of flavors, of consistencies, especially when you're doing something like an Ironman. You just don't want the same gel. Some people are okay like that, but most people, you don't want the same product for 12 hours. You'll go out of your mind. So get yourself a range of products that work for you, different glycemic indexes, different absorption speeds, but things that you're happy with. And once you find a range of products that work for you, stick with them and take those with you to the course, to the race. Because if you've trained with them, then try, if it's all possible, to use them in the race. And there are most ways you can organize yourself so it's possible. Where the wheels come off for a lot of people, as some of you will know, is when you train and you're happy and you're using a certain range of products, and then you go to the race and you use what's on the course and you haven't trained with that. That's often a very, very high risk situation. So back to fluid, and we're sort of switching between these two things as we get closer to the race point. How much and what to drink. So this comes back to talking about Andy at the beginning. And talking about his sodium loss rate and his sweat rate. So we all have different rates of both of these. Our sweat concentration, we'll talk about in a moment, is genetically determined. And that's a constant for us as individuals. Our sweat rate is highly variable. And of course, our sweat rate is a function of the temperature we're working in, the race conditions, environment, the clothes we're wearing, whether we're sick, whether we're overtrained, multiple factors that you're all aware of affect your sweat rate. Your sodium concentration is what we do. We test people. We use a medical test. We have medical equipment. And we actually test athletes, extract a sweat sample, run it through an analyzer, and we'll come up with a specific number that is your sodium loss rate in milligrams per liter of sweat. And for example, I lose 600 and, well, call it 700 milligrams per liter of sweat. Now, each individual, and you obviously, actually in Toronto, you have a test center there if you're actually interested in it, but you don't, as an amateur athlete, you don't necessarily need to go out and get yourself tested straight away. You can sort of start off at a reference point and titrate and iterate around that until you find something that's working for you. And we've done over 10,000 of our physical sweat tests. And of course, the bell curve has established itself, and the median is 990 milligrams per liter of sweat. So that's a really good start point for most people. Around about 1,000 milligrams. Assume you're losing about 1,000 milligrams of sodium per liter of sweat, and then start that, use that as your start point, and then make adjustments either down or up over the course of a couple of training blocks. See what's kind of working for you in different conditions. Your sweat rate is an easy thing to check, and you should do this under a number of different conditions. An easy one is if you're doing a Zwift session. Important, weigh yourself naked before. It'll become apparent why in a moment. Weigh yourself naked onto the bike. Do your session. An hour is an easy number to get your head around. Do an hour session. Keep your environment the same. Keep the fan on. Have fluid there. And when you finish the session, off again, naked. Dry yourself off. So you don't want to have all that weight of that sweat in your clothing. Dump all that. Dry yourself off. Weigh. The difference between the two plus the fluid you take in is your sweat loss. So I weigh about 70 kilos. And if I do, I imagine I do a Zwift session for an hour, I lose a kilo when I weigh myself afterwards. So that's 1 kilo lost in body weight. And then I've taken in 500 ml of fluid during that 1 hour. So my effective sweat rate is 1.5 kilos, which is 1.5 liters. So under those conditions, I lost 1.5 liters. But you also want to test that in the kind of environments you're going to race in. So, obviously, if you go for a run, if I go for a run or you go for a run today in our local environment, most of us, our sweat loss rate will be down to around about 500 ml an hour, unless we're really, really heavy sweaters. But if we all got on an airplane and landed in Miami and went for a run tomorrow, we're probably double or triple that sweat rate just because we're not acclimatized to that environment. And we just, until we get acclimatized, we're going to sweat a lot more. After acclimation, you're probably going to come back to a closer to your personal sweat loss under those conditions. So Mark said a lot of you going to Tremblant this year, notably humid there, but that environment. You live in Toronto, which is very humid. So, measure your sweat rate in the spring and measure it in the summer, measure it in dry conditions, measure it in humid, but be aware of it. And then when you multiply that by the duration of your session, you get your individual net loss rate. And by example, if I go back to Andy, he loses 1,800 milligrams of sodium per liter of sweat, and he loses about 2 liters of sweat an hour. I lose about 700 milligrams and I lose about a liter an hour. So imagine, same performance level, that we're both doing a 70.3 and we're going to take 5 hours to do it. In the course of that 5 hours, I'm going to lose 5 liters of sweat, 700 milligrams. I'm going to lose about 3,500 milligrams of sodium. By the same token, Andy is losing 3,600 milligrams an hour. So he's losing the same in 1 hour that I'm losing in the whole event. And he's out there for 5 hours. So he's going to lose 16, 17 grams of sodium during the same event. So you can see how the impact on two athletes with the similar pace, but different loss rates is going to have a significant impact on their performance. I can just about survive that race without the need for any supplemental sodium. Andy, on the other hand, about halfway through the bike, he's going to be suffering a whole pile of pain. And if he doesn't supplement his sodium loss rate, then the wheels are going to come off on the run. So that's why it's really, really important to know what these numbers are for you. And even if you don't know your sweat concentration, use that 1,000 milligram as your start point. You don't need to replace everything you're losing in a race. 70% is a good guideline of an appropriate replacement rate. There's a source of sodium matter? Not really, other than if you add sodium to sugar to water, you'll get a faster uptake. But really, it doesn't matter. It's just the form you're taking it in. So in our range of products, on the left there, we have the electrolyte capsules. They're 250 milligrams each. They're primarily made for runners. You just crack one out, put it in your mouth, and you get a hit. They're easy to carry, and you can pick up water off the off the feed stations, and there are other companies that make sodium capsules or sodium tabs, very, very similar to ours. There's the effervescent tablets, and these got 0 sugar in them. And then this is our range of products. Then there's the powders, which have a small carbohydrate component, really to speed up that transit time. So the source, as long as you're getting the right amount, the source doesn't matter. Now, what I should say, a lot of people there are 2 possible mistakes you can make. One, you can make your own solution. You can use table salt. You can add some sugar to it, maybe some lemon, boil it up, and put it in the fridge and use that. But to get 1,000 milligrams, remember, the 60% chloride component. So you're going to need about 2.2 grams of salt to get the 1,000 milligram effectiveness. And once you start getting into those bigger numbers with salt, with the chloride, at 3,500 milligrams, you're getting in the range of salt water, which of course is going to cause you massive gastric distress, if you can drink it at all. So be aware of that if you're making up your own solution, that salt is only 40% chloride, and to get the same amount, you've got to put a lot more in. So be aware of that for its taste and effect on your gut. And the second thing is, if you're using a carb mix with sodium in it, always, and you're trying to increase your sodium intake, so say it's got 40 grams of carbs and 500 milligrams of sodium, and you're trying to double that up to 1,000 milligrams of sodium, be aware that you're also doubling up your carb intake to 80 grams, and subsequent possibility of gastric distress from a higher intake of carbs that you're not ready for. So there are many ways to get in these ratios, but when you are sort of messing around and trying to adjust for your own situation, be aware of the impact of making those adjustments are. How much fuel do you need during your training? 2 variables. We've got intensity and duration, and there's another one as well, heat, but that's primarily for hydration. So as duration, intensity, or heat increase, 3 inputs have to also increase: fluid, carbohydrates, and sodium. And this is a standard kind of chart you can see around everywhere. Any event you're doing, I think up to sort of 60, 75 minutes, like a Zwift session, as long as you haven't got a double day, and as long as you've, outside of your training session, you're well fueled, you can get away with, almost 0 supplemental carbs. When you get into the 60 and above, you want to be looking at 30 grams an hour. 2 hours and above, if it's very hard, 60 grams, and then up to 90 grams for those really hard, really long sessions. But your fuel intake, the grams per hour, and just for a reference, remember there are 4 calories in every gram of carbs, 9 calories in every gram of fat. What you'll actually be able to take in is a function of your body size and where you are on your athletic journey. So there's a lot of discussion in endurance sports at the moment about the amount of carbohydrates that athletes are taking in. And be careful about, some of the examples I'm going to give you now, and also what you read. You very much have to do this for yourself. But this year, for the first time, we're working, publicly. We work with a lot of Tour de France riders in the past. But this is the first year we're actually officially a team partner. We're a team partner with Lotto Destiny, and now in the professional professional ranks of the Pro Tour, it's pretty common for most of those riders to be taking in 120 grams an hour. And probably the biggest example is actually of a female triathlete, professional triathlete from last year. She's about 5 foot tall, 125 pounds, tiny athlete. She won Ironman South Africa, and she took in that race, over the whole course of the race, 154 grams an hour. So the body is capable of taking in a lot of carbs, but not everybody is capable of taking a lot of carbs. And if you are going to increase your carb intake, you need to train your gut to do so. And definitely give yourself 10 to 12 weeks to do this. Increase slowly and go over what you plan to race with. So if your target for a race is 90 grams an hour, and you might, so 90 grams an hour, you might focus for the bike, and then it's quite natural to drop down a bit for the run, down to about 60 or 70. But if your target is 90, you'd build it up slowly, get it up to maybe 110, train your gut, get your gut used to taking in and processing those carbs under stress, under load, and then drop it down. And most bodies are quite capable of doing this. It's a bit like those guys, who knows why they do it. They eat, 50 hot dogs in 15 minutes or something silly. If any of us tried to do that, we'd probably die right now. But, you can train your body to ingest a large amount of food. I actually don't know what they do after the 15 minutes when the competition's over, but you can get that food in and you can get it processed. So if you haven't thought about taking in a few more carbs, think about how it might affect your performance. As you saw in that cramping diagram, it's often seen as one of the causes of cramp. You run out of muscle glycogen. The muscles have got no glycogen left. They start seizing up because you're not feeding them at a high enough rate. So think about your output levels. Think about what your race is. Think about the length. Think about the delivery platform, the delivery method, and adjust accordingly. And the important thing here is the logistics. Most things come down to logistics to the end. It's a logistic battle. And there's a simple way to deal with this. How do you carry all of this? So if you do go to 90, say, and you're going to be on the bike for, doing an Ironman, you're going to bike for 6 hours. So 6 9s are 54. So you need to carry on the bike, say 500 to 550 grams of carbs. So what I recommend you do is on a table, scoop together, literally a couple of 1,000 grams worth of carbs of all the different kinds of products you like to use, put them together on the table, and then extract from that 500 to 550 grams in this particular example into a second pile. And that's your pile for the bike section of this particular Ironman, or whatever race you're doing. Now you've got a pile. The first thing you're going to do is now fixate on that pile. That is how much food you have to get into your body during the bike section of the race. So that's the first thing, is you've got it into your conscious. I need to eat that amount of food. The second thing you've got to do is decide how you're going to carry all this food. So you've got a bento box. Is some of it going to be in carb mix as fluid? Some of it in your pockets? How are you going to carry this on the bike? And then your third issue is how are you going to eat all this stuff? Which sounds strange, but because you're going to have a wider variety of foods, you tend to, when you get on the bike, you're going to eat more complex carbs when your body's fresher and your stomach's not under stress yet. So that maybe the first 2 or 3 hours, then you might eat your more complex carbs. But when you hit a hill, then you might be taking in a gel. And as you get more stressed, then you move into more high glycemic index carbs that, getting absorbed immediately. So think about that, how you're going to take it all in, and do the same for the run. So if you plan to be out on the run for 4 hours, and you're going to go to 60 grams of carbs an hour on the run, that's basically 8 gels. So you want 8 gels. You want to stuff those. If you're going to take your gels with you, stuff those in one of your shoes. So when you come into T2, they go straight into your pocket, and you're going to be taking one every 20 to 30 minutes through the run. So you want to go through the logistics and work that all out. I think we've got one slide left. Yes. Does the type of energy product matter? So yes, it does, in the sense of what you actually need. 1 hour training ride versus a 6 hour race. 1 hour training ride, you probably don't need anything. 6 hour race, well, it depends really. What's the course like? Is it very hilly? Is it flat? So that's going to affect what you actually take in. What format works best? So in that particular situation. Classically, in a gravel race or a mountain bike race, it's much more difficult to take your hands off the handlebars. So you might have a pack with your nutrition in a tube that you can uptake, or you might be on a trail run, a long trail run that's not supported. So you've got to carry a lot of food. So you got to factor that in as well. And so, when we were talking about what you're going to take on a particular course for a particular race, think about all of these factors that come into it when you're planning what you're going to take in. But your general guidelines are that always preload, both from hydration and a carbohydrate standpoint. Find out what products work for you. Have a wide variety of products. Make sure that you've worked out a plan of what you're going to take in, how you're going to carry it, when you're going to take it, both from your nutrition and your hydration standpoint, and be aware of what the demands of the particular race are, both from a technical standpoint, an environmental standpoint, and support standpoint. So there we go. That's I could go a little bit further, but we've only got about 15 minutes left. And I'm hoping you've got some questions. I can dig into any other particular issues in detail. So open for questions.
Let's hear them, guys. Let's hear them.
I got a question.
Who's this?
Rob, sorry.
Hi, Rob.
How are you doing? I liked your presentation. Very informative. Thank you. I bought your 1,500 milligram salt fizzy tabs, or the fizzy tabs. I like them, but if I read the directions right, it's 2 tabs for 1,500 milligrams. That's correct?
That's a good question. So all of our solutions are based around 500 mil of water for one serving. But so there's 2 aspects of this. What we're measuring, what we spoke about before, is sodium loss per liter of sweat. But most people use the classic, 500 mil bottle. So most serving sizes are 500 mil, and most of the industry has that as a serving size. So yes, that is correct. You need 2 tabs per liter to get the 1,500 strength. But if you're just using a smaller bottle, then it's 1 tab for 500 mil. If that makes sense.
Actually, yes, it does. That answers my next question. So thank you for clarifying that.
My pleasure.
I would ask a question.
Who's this?
This is Tyler.
Hi, Tyler.
Hi. Thanks for the presentation. That was great. So I've been in this phase of mixing up my own drink mixes.
Nothing wrong with that.
So this is probably definitely not an expert. So this might be a very obvious answer. But when I was doing it, I was calculating everything. And I thought I was this genius because I was like, since I'm mixing it myself, I can mix it to an isotonic concentration and have no GI issues and be able to take in tons of carbs. And then really quickly realized that I would need to be drinking like 20 liters of water to hit my carb goals.
Yeah.
Like there's no way around that, right? That's just like in an Ironman situation, to hit the carb goals, you have to go hypertonic.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And also not only hypertonic, but you got to think about your gut clearing speed as well in terms of the format of the food, which is why that's so important as well. So and that's why you tend to eat those more complex carbs when your stomach is fresher at the beginning, and that's when you can load up a little bit more, but then you kind of go to the more simple carbs towards the end and definitely on the run. But your job really is to reduce the stress on your stomach as much as you can, because if you're just overloading all the time, one thing we didn't talk about, which is related to that, is the format of the carb. So if we go into the worms and the about carb uptake, a lot of you will be aware of this, but there are two pathways in the stomach through which carbohydrates are absorbed, and one of them absorbs glucose, one of them absorbs fructose, simplification. And roughly, again, these are all generalizations, but we try to deliver those two sugar formats at a 2-to-1 ratio. And I hope you're getting that right in your mix there, Tyler. I hope you're getting a 2-to-1 ratio.
I'm
the
really
reason for that
quickly
is-
editing it.
Yeah, and the reason you can probably get some gastric distress, because if it's all glucose, and you're trying to take in, say, 90 grams an hour, some stomachs can absorb that. But it's a bit like, the analogy is, the on-ramp to the freeway. When the freeway's empty, you can just pile onto the freeway at, full 120 kilometers an hour, boom, you're straight on. But if the freeway's backed up, which I know it always is in Toronto, when the freeway is backed up and you're trying to get on the on-ramp, then you just can't get on there, and you certainly can't do it at 120. And it's very similar with the gut, that if you fully loaded it with glucose, and the pathway can't absorb anymore, and you're trying to stuff in more glucose, what's going to happen is you're going to get a bolus of undigested glucose in your stomach, and over time that'll build up, and that's when you get that bloating and gastric distress. So, modern designs of sports nutrition products try to go for that 2-to-1 ratio. All of ours do. And the second component, the fructose, is absorbed in a different pathway. So roughly 60 grams of glucose, 30 grams of, if you're trying to do a 90-gram intake, 30 grams of fructose should get absorbed at such a rate that you get good stomach clearing. And it's very, very important, if you're designing your own products, to be aware of that with your ingestion levels as well. Or if you're buying products, to be aware to buy, modern products, or be aware of the mix and match of the two products. I don't know if that answers your question, Tyler, but it was kind of along those lines. But anyway, it brought up a very interesting point.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Question, if I can, Kyle over here, Sean.
Oh, hi, Kyle.
How are you? Thanks for the presentation. It was wonderful. Question about the drink mix. I saw online that I can mix it up to, I think, a 6% glucose concentration. Have you guys tested like adding more to that? Like, will it still mix okay if you make like a bottle with more than that, like a higher concentration of glucose per the bottle? And is that something you guys have looked at with athletes?
Yeah, we've gone up to 120 grams. Actually, I've got some prototype 120 gram special super duper mix. So yeah, we have tested that. And it's, again, as I said before, it's not really the solution the fluid should take it up, and it should absorb okay, or it should dissolve okay. The real issue is your ability to absorb it. So yeah, it's worth experimenting for you as an individual. And I would go up in 10 gram, which is hard to do in a scoop level, but roughly kind of 10 gram increments, and then try and get up to that higher level, say 110, and then bring it. And if you're comfortable with that, then bring it down for a race. But yeah, it should work.
Okay. And then another question about the sodium specifically. I like the tablets a lot. In a long race environment, is there a benefit to going with the powder versus the tablet in terms of like the slight like effervescence from the tablet? Any idea, like feedback from other athletes, if that leads to like any issues that they've noticed versus like a powder, which might be different?
No, the reason we have the tabs and the powders is primarily because of just personal preference. Some people don't like the effervescent component. Some people like the powders, and that's why we designed those two products. But essentially, no, not really any difference.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it again.
My pleasure.
Hello, it's Angela.
Hello, who's this? Sorry.
It's Angela.
Hi, Angela.
Hey, I've had a lot of gels over many decades. I don't know what yours taste like. And I haven't done a lot of like research or even gone onto the website. I don't know if some of the fellow athletes can chime in here, or if you, Sean, can give me an idea. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean that's a very good point actually, and that's the point I was trying to come across, that there is no magic gel. I mean, as much as I like our gels, they're not going to work for everybody, and so it's a matter of finding a gel that you like, that works for you under the conditions you find yourself racing in. And I'd like to say our gels are the best thing, but they aren't to everybody. They work for some people and they don't work for other people. And there is no universal food that does work for everybody. So all I can say is try them. But even if you do like our gels, then I would still have different sources as well, so you don't get flavor fatigue.
Yeah.
Definitely have 2 or 3 different options that you can call on to to use in a race. But yeah, there's no magic formula, I'm afraid.
And
Are
what I
yours
did,
flavored?
and I bought the fuel sample pack, and I found that was a nice way to test the stuff out, because there's some gels and stuff in there. I did the fuel
Good
sample
idea.
pack, and then that's where I fell in love with the gels. They're just like so neutral that they don't have that like goo sort of flavor you're probably used to from back in the day. Salted caramel was my go-to. I could not imagine taking one of those now.
Yeah, I hear you. I had a bad Lake Placid experience, and we'll never go back to that flavor again.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Can speak to the gels
Jessica,
as well.
Hi.
Yeah. Hi. One thing that I really like is the 90-gram pack.
Yes.
They come with a really big pack that you can do for a really long run. And just the other comment, I've never finished a run and had gel left and actually just finished it because it tastes good. And I do that with these gels. They really are good. And I understand you're being political, Sean, and not saying that they're the best. I think that they're the best gels I've had.
I'll send you the $50 later, Jessica. Thanks.
But no, they're great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the 90s are sweet. We do all our long runs with them, and even like I hate carrying stuff in my hand. Like I can't hold a handhold bottle or anything, and I hate it. But like holding that gel, you don't even notice. I just used it for the half marathon last weekend. Like it was.
Yeah,
nice.
I
It's
love
so
them. Yeah,
perfect.
yeah, they are good.
Yeah.
Hi, Sean. James here.
Hi, James. Good to meet you.
Good. Thanks for the presentation. I'm fairly new to this, only 2 years into this endurance thing. So I'm curious how you know that it's too much as far as grams per hour, and like maybe every run hurts for me. So it's maybe hard to tell what the difference is between something that's good and something that's not good. So what are the key things that
when you say run hurts, how do you?
Well, just that everything seems hard when you start into this.
Right. And so your question is about how many grams of carbs to be taking in?
Yeah, how many grams of carbs, and how do you know if the type of fuel that you're taking is working for your body? Like, I don't know about gut issues. Like I've never really felt terrible other than having wings and fries before I ran, but
right. I mean, gut issues are a bit like, the old definition of porn. You know it when you see it. So you'll know it when if you've got a gut issue, and everyone will have one, at some point in their career, you'll have gut issues for all sorts of reasons. But it's, what you want to do is alleviate that. And I think the mistake that a lot of new athletes make, and also a mistake that people are making as a result of what's happened on the internet in the last 8 to 10 years, where there's been it's a very valid move to higher fat diets and using fat as a fuel source much more, which is a very valid approach. But one of the results of that is people have sort of started to cut, or had started to cut, carbohydrates out significantly or completely. And one of the tenets of endurance racing is fueling for the effort. And that's an important thing for you to understand as you sort of go forward with your career, is not just your racing, but even a Zwift session or a 10K run, is to be aware to fuel for the effort. Because, just going out willy-nilly and not fueling properly means you'll do the effort, But as you described, you know, it's like this hurts and what, you know, all these things are, I'm having problems everywhere. And often that's a result of not properly fueling for the effort. So people think, well, it's only an hour long, I don't need to do it, but it might be in zone 4. You know, there might be a set of intervals either on the track or on the bike, a set of intervals you got to do. And in order to do those intervals and get the maximum benefit, you've got to fuel properly for that particular session. So to be conscious of that and fuel properly for the session. And sometimes you can go out and do a zone 2 ride for 3 hours. You don't need any food, you know, because your focus is building up your ability to burn fat and your ability to be much more flexible with your fueling. And that takes training as well. And that'll be a painful experience as well, by the way. You know, you can't go straight into a 3-hour ride without fueling and not have a major sort of, you know, stomach problem in terms of you want food. You know, you generally increase the duration very, very gradually. But fueling, I think the one underlying thing to take away is any effort you're doing, consciously think about how you're fueling before you do it and hydrating, and fuel for the effort. So right after this, I'm going to do a Zwift session myself. But it's only an hour, but I'm going to fuel properly for it because I want to get the maximum benefit out of it. And so that's something I would urge you to do. And hopefully over time, you'll see the benefit from that.
Great. Thanks, Sean.
Sorry, this is Rob again. I got
Hi, Rob.
one more question. If I read correctly, your carb mix, your powder mix has maltodextrin in it.
Yes.
And do you have any powder mix that won't have it? My gut doesn't like maltodextrin. It wouldn't end well with me if I took it.
No, we don't. So you gotta speak to Kyle and buy some of his. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm afraid it's maltodextrin. Yeah, but it's a good point you bring up, Rob. That again, some of the products in our range won't fit for some people. So, you know, if you like the gels, use those, but then find another source of a drink mix that might work better for you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, 7 on the nose. I think we nailed it right within the hour. Beautiful.
We're all Zoom experts nowadays.
Exactly. I'm sure people spend enough time on here, so we'll
Really?
let them all go. Good questions though, guys. Love it. And if you have any more along the way, you can always shoot them to me, or PH is awesome at helping with the questions as well. I know. What's the best way for people to contact directly?
If you email hello@precisionhydration.com, we'll always get back to you. And you can we also do free one-on-one video calls. So if you want even more Zoom time, set one of those up, and then we can talk particularly about the individual situation. And they're usually focused around a particular race or event that someone's planning and racing for. But if you're spending 15 hours a week training, and you're spending a fortune on flights, hotels, and bikes, don't leave your nutrition and hydration as a secondary issue. It's a primary issue. Deal with it, and it's an important part of your planning and your preparation.
Well said. Don't do all that training and throw it away from a nutrition and hydration phone.
Really?
Come on. I think I've hammered it home to them enough times, but it's good to bring the experts in to hammer it down a little further. So thanks so much for coming by, Sean. We're
my pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Well, good luck to everybody for your season ahead.